So I think we have discussed a lot about this topic already, but let's discuss. What? It's kind of done. Let's a little bit more structurally so that I think we understand a lot of aspects of why we choose to build in a certain way. A lot of these stuff. So, and um, the agenda today is bring in some concepts like a kit, style guide, design system to really nail it down what exactly it is. Uh, Sometimes we tend to use these interchangeably and probably figure out what exactly do they mean. Um, there's, well, building a component library or using a component library. There are a lot of opinions, a lot of ways in which people handle those, and we can like, figure out few ways in which these problems are taken care of, and how to build the infrastructure to support. Share your experiences. How do you do it? And it should be, yeah, we'll open it for discussions. I think in terms of key concepts, first one, style guide. I think we talked about it in the previous discussion. It's really like um, defining guidelines and visual references of product like typography, color, UI components, and assets. It's more about bringing consistency to design, and overall product looks very cohesive and consistent across. So it's really a more of a documentation, which usually comes from designers, and you follow it in your code. Um, another Yeah, UI kit. So we talked a lot about Figma and how it use like MUI has a UI kit which it easily use. Just put in components that has a lot of features. Sketch also has similar options. So there's multiple options where you don't have to go again and build or copy paste your components, and still simply use the inbuilt features to kind of use these individual components. Still have to place it, but still far easier than and make sure that when designers are designing it, it's very consistent for them to be able to use it. Next up is component library. And component library is what we call UI component library, which is when the developers are really replicating what the UI kit represents. So it could be or atoms, molecules, like we talk about atomic design. There'll be simple components like inputs, buttons, to slightly complex components like selects, drop downs, and stuff like that. It's really a collection of these ready-made components which you can just pick and start using everywhere. Um, and then comes the design system. And I think design system is like the really a buzzword nowadays. It's going, everybody is building design systems, which really it's a system which encompasses everything. It has patterns, it has components, it has iconography, it has typography, style guides. All of this combines to create a design system. It's really more importantly a pattern library, I would say. So, well, you could have individual components which are consistent, which works well, but then you can assemble them in infinite ways. But that's not always correct, or probably not right. So if you want to provide a consistent user experience, it's really important to set up some patterns, some guidelines, which this design system is all about. Correct, Chris? So, okay. Let's talk about benefits of building a component library. So we're gonna not talk about design system, what we've already covered in previous talks. but let's figure out the development aspect of building a component library or using a component library, and we'll see like what are the pros, cons, and different trade-offs that we basically have while building component libraries. So before we actually jump into that, I think with all of us using React and with the introduction of React, components are like it becomes second nature for all the developers to start thinking in terms of components, building small pieces. Think of atomic design, where you take a web page, structure it in small pieces, which you call atoms, and then kind of assemble them to create molecules, organisms. So and you build a complete web page out of it. So how does where does component library comes in is where it's really a library of components which you use. That like if you're using something like that, it's going to be consistent, and that is going to be a very important aspect. So if you have established a design system, component library actually helps you reinforce that. So don't diverge from your usual like we're putting some style somewhere else, some style somewhere else. It's really just like providing you an interface to make sure that you have set patterns which you can follow across. Reusability, I think it goes hand in hand with component-driven development, where you have developed a component to make sure that you start using it everywhere. If there are changes, incremental changes, whatnot, you make it a single place. It goes everywhere. So reusability and I think consistency is another point which goes hand in hand. Another point is accessibility, which is I think really important today. It's very much overlooked, but something that if baked right into the component library helps make the web application a lot more accessible. So component yeah, if you maintain a component library, you can make it far more accessible and saves development time, which again goes with reusability and consistency. You don't have to figure out whether what you've developed now matches the other web page or not, because essentially using the same stuff. And testability. Testability is really important. It helps out bringing the testability. It helps out bringing out you test out your UI components in silo, and if your isolated components are working well, all you have to take care about in your web application is really the integration of different components. The practice is about for developing a component library. We already talked about atomic design, how it's anyone use atomic design if they're the component library, we keep them at home. Every time we do something different, like a date picker that can only do in the future. A date picker as a component. And we gather that. But then that becomes a new program. I see. I think mostly atomic design is all about that. The component libraries or the design systems that are built, they have atomic design at the very base of it, where you build small atoms, you build your inputs, your switches, radio buttons, and then there could be other components which are combining those smaller components, building molecules and other more interactive state managing components. Documentation. So again, one of the pieces that comes up a lot while designers are designing something and developers are developing something. There's no common documentation which guides what would be created, and then there is always, yeah, this is what we use, this is what they use. So bring about, like you talk about MUI, right, which has a good documentation. So it's always, if you're using default styles, it's just always good to refer back to what you're using, and then, hey, it's not going in line with what you're following, right? So if you're building a component library from scratch, it's really important to maintain a documentation, whether it be storybook or people are using custom solutions also. Or it could be a simple web page where you just display how your component looks. At the end of it, everybody should have access to that and kind of refer to how it looks like, or is it looking weird in my implementation. Yeah. Then the whole process, building that reaction, and then adding documentation, storybook. Yeah, so we're kind of halfway there. Try to make sure that whenever a new feature or new component, a page is being built, the designers first look at the components individually, look at the states, try to do our best about that. And then for those components, we first go and build those components individually using Storybook, get that interaction, and then we try to use real world data to make sure that this is how the components actually gonna interact overall. Then yeah, I mean, a lot of documentation. We want to expand further. Say that there is a Figma kit, let's say, which the designers have created about those components. We integrate those with the Storybook. So you kind of match what's looking in Figma, what is it, how is it interacting in the real world, and also the use cases. So build up very similar to how other component libraries build. But they have component interactions and the use cases of, like, you have to use it like this. So use this variant, use that variant. So market is also something that the user is. Yeah, right now it's not very solid, you could say. We do have separate Figma pages for different components, but not as a kit right now. But that would be the ideal way. And then testing is really important, but like, what are the testing parts of it? So unit testing is, we do unit test the code, which is really important. I'm not gonna expand further on that. But then you can test visually. So one part of that is taken care of a Storybook, where you're seeing the component interact and how it's in isolation, it's looking and working. But also snapshot testing, where it is expected, you're making a changes, and incrementally you're not expecting your DOM or virtual DOM to diverge, or making sure that the changes that you're making is really expected. Snapshot testing comes really handy when, because visual testing might not be always, a lot of part is manual, and there are tools out there which using those, which you can do in visual testing, which may not be scalable and may not be very appropriate tools.
So are you using the snapshot testing kit?
Not out of the.
We tried using that at one of my previous companies. Not, but I think it's really theoretically useful.
I've used snapshot testing with Jest.
Okay, yeah. I think that's behind the scenes sort
of. I see. I've not used. We're not actually using Storybook's snapshot testing. We're building on Jest right now, which is really powerful. As soon as you're just doing the snapshot testing for component libraries, really the smaller components, it gets really tricky when you have bigger components with a lot of edge cases and pieces. So that does not scale well. Trade-offs of building.
Yeah. Like you said, there are tools that can do it. design. I only use one. It was my last company, and we created genetic reports for people, and our QA team would use that tool to compare the current report design to like the previous or the existing version.
Yeah.
So if there were changes made, if the software detected what those changes were, or more likely or more often it was used to make sure there weren't any changes accidentally. Because it's very critical that those reports look correctly correct. So what I'm curious about, if you have any experience with Noah or anybody, are there tools to help automate like visual testing of a web page or develop just a web page, maybe a mobile app, to like the Figma design? Like to, or maybe, if you export Figma to a PDF or something, like how can we, is there any way to reduce that manual work of that has to be done kind of to validate the developed design or how the software matches the design?
Yeah.
Automated
Yeah. That's, yeah. So whatever I have used before is only compares what you had before to what you have now.
Okay.
But I've never seen, or at least found, a good solution to where you can take a Figma or any other tool which you have designed and then match it.
Yeah.
Probably you can keep screenshots of that in your repo and then try and automate that. But I don't think that's again a feasible way to automate your visual testing.
Right.
Anybody has done visual testing before? Yeah, so we had our end-to-end test written in Selenium previously, and we used to use Protractor. So Protractor has this image comparison tool, and what we really had a use case for was there's a lot of charts, with different use cases. So you take in that chart component and then like bring in a lot of use cases. We had screenshots for all of those, so that should work perfectly. And yeah, the visual testing library used to match all of those charts. And it was really important because given a lot of different kind of data, the chart looks different, and we really didn't want to diverge from one step to another. So yeah, that was primary use case, but we moved away from that because there's a lot of factors that comes into visual testing, and it's a complicated process. Like you.
It's a hard problem. There are no tools that solve it, and that's problem solving.
Yeah.
It also depends whether you're right.
I know it's hard and it's not possible. Or whatever in the current state of things, like
Students, you're saying? I would say like sometimes running just go in that aspect. Yeah. I don't know with the snapshot testing, set thresholds for like just passes or fails or.
I don't think so. It's majorly like even if it's a class name change or if it's an attribute change, that could affect your styling. So just through, even if it's a small just change between both the virtual DOMs, it will not really sure whether there's a good way to define because you have a lot of ways in which you can style your components, and anything could just break the visual design of the component. But then
I've had a lot of like company ideas based on acts and trying to get like a round trip between design and development.
there's this tool that I came across. It's I think from UXPin, which where the designers can go and create designs and it can output JSX.
Yeah.
I'm not
I always
sure.
wanted the other way to go, but you just can't do that.
That could be a lot trickier though.
Is it, you say that was UX 10?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think they have something called UX merge or something. I don't know.
Yeah. The problem is like, these tools I've seen that output any kind of code is like, it's not code that you would want.
Yeah,
to
yeah.
data.
It's not production.
It's not,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, it's functional. Yeah.
Yeah. That's basically what it
You were
was.
taking me back.
Well, while there could be a lot of good stuff that comes out of maintaining or creating your own component library, there are a lot of trade-offs that you should look at. And yes, one of the most obvious one is huge upfront effort to build components from scratch, think about their design, a lot of interactions. So both on the designer's front and the developer's front, it takes a lot of time to kind of figure out what exactly you want to build. And well, building a design system, it kind of ties in, but then again, it's a lot of effort. Follow that. And another part is maintenance. You've built something, but it's not done. It's again, you have to maintain it. And that is a lot of effort because you cannot think about all the edge cases and everything in the first go. So making sure that you're incrementally building while not breaking the older stuff that you've implemented, it becomes a real pain.
So when does that actually occur?
So let's say you have built a form component, or form control or something. You have error states, you have warning states. Maybe initially when you started building out, you used inputs. Yeah, but when you start adding at states, or I'll take an example of select component. A lot of these options that we had were static. You render a web page, you already have all the options, and it was easy just do that. But then there are a lot of places where we had drop downs where we have to fetch data, show them, and it's not really a good experience to keep showing the loader while the whole page is loading. So you wanna add that functionality into the select drop down itself, so that it's loading, you see the loading. But that is not something that we thought of initially. We built it afterward. So it could be easy or difficult to add something like that, but it's again part of maintenance where you have to consistently add features. And then extra setup. I think, if you're maintaining a component library, probably want to host it, probably want to have different, like we talked about testing, we talked about documentation. So there's some part of extra setup that is required other than your main applications development, and that is another effort to look at. Any other trade-offs anybody can think of, or any thoughts?
So, developed your component library. You saying that you started from kind of base atomic things that were already created in library and then built on top of that? Or
So I'd say like our designer has a big fun. That might have been based on something you got someone else or interactions with the prompts.
But were you starting from like your base was in HTML, let's say select? Were you starting from like a very bare bones, already made components in React or something else?
I think we kind of introduced a layer of abstraction over the base HTML include or something.
It really depends on basis of components and components, right? Inputs we build from base buttons. It was like really easy. We use style system. I'm going to talk about that, which is the base, and it provides some basic elements, and we style it based on variants. But a little bit more complex components like drop downs. We use some of the headless libraries.
So what I was getting at, because you were asking questions about other, I don't think anyone's planning to do this, but if you're ever planning to create a UI library from scratch, don't, because I'm sure none of you are, because you're not as dumb as I was 4 or 5 years ago. Because there's just so many things. There's so many edge cases, so many usability issues, and if you possibly can, like you're saying, to use like a headless library or something where they've already thought of those things, do it, because it's an enormous amount of stuff to think of. You think of your like ideal happy path. After that, you realize, oh, there's like 100 other things I haven't even thought of. That's my pitch for, because we're using MUI, that's my pitch for like using something, whether it's something like MUI, the normal Hero UI design where it's already designed for you and then you can theme it, or they have a version that's kind of headless where you just design everything from scratch, but they have the functionality already.
Doesn't that go into for example, when you build drop chat, so you maintain it part will be like, oh, now we want to support that one.
Yeah.
The paper on the drop down, you have to have all those things and so now we want to support accessibility, ARIA labels and whatnot. So I can make all your
and
all that is maintained.
Yeah, and that's maintenance, and you get that for free, or at least at a little cost if you use something like UI, because dark mode, you can do that with the theme. All the area stuff, if you just remember to put in area attributes. Yeah, the maintenance is huge.
And then thing would be, again, I like this, standards and I mean, they've been, but when issue was like 4 being the jump from 4 to 5. The kind of get out of right or for free. You take X, Y, Z. Now you have to go ahead
and incorporate that.
The standard.
Yeah. That again ties in with like maintaining all of this and having having a lot of effort, which you could get out of the box. Well, yeah, approaches to building a component library or maintaining a component
I
library.
think we did the trade-off, but we never did this. I would like to say that, like, when I use it, why? Like, when I look at the HTML, could have been much more efficient, or could have been tighter. That you don't get for free. Because material UI is trying to solve the problem for the whole world, not just Markov or
That's a good point.
right? And you could do that much more and tighter. All right, my label is always going to be above and then you put all of them. And often it's a little hard to measure, but I think that is the issue, which is personality of it.
Yeah.
Right, where like, my site will look very much like me, typical Android. If I were to look at and design, or something to be and you could make out like how there is a lot more spaced out and just one. All right, let's put everything over here. You can search, you can also order food right from the same source.
So I just wanted to take in this point that yeah, building a library from scratch, it has its pros and its cons. Like the pros that you mentioned, you have infinite customability. Like you have control of the source. So whatever you can do, not just from the styling or UI look and feel perspective, but also from the interaction perspective, and maybe something that you want to build right into the component that the library does not allow you to. So there is a lot of power that you have, and then there's like branding aspect of it. That if you really care about branding, if you really want to make your product stand out or look different, then there's no problems here, because it will take effort, but it will eventually you'll have your own standout application. Another point is that you have minimal dependencies, not built in anything based on of something. So you're not really tied into a particular system. The system that you've built of your own. Right? So dependencies are very minimal. But again, I think the biggest of cons, huge cross-functional effort as well as huge maintenance cost, which goes into decision making of whether you want to build from scratch versus a custom-made solution. But then again, it's not always black and white. Like either you build from scratch or you use something fully powered. And I think that's what we're going to discuss next. And this is something that we do at Markov. So you can really take something like style system or theme UI. Anybody have used that? So style system is really like a CSS and JS solution, which lets you give your theme across the app to follow. And this is really helpful when you want to really put constraints over what you can do with your design system or your style guide. So developers do not usually can just pick any random color and put it onto your components and style a button differently. It's going to be really consistent, but at the same time, you're going to be defining and maintaining that theme that you have to use across. So it's very similar to how MUI provides theme, but not the underlying components. So you still have a lot of power to develop your individual components, but then you can use the theme to kind of maintain the styling and consistency. And then what we do on top of this is we use a lot of headless libraries that we talk about. We use React table for maintaining the lists. We use different. There's one headless.ui which gives you out of the box good snippet for that. Like gives you individual components, how you're gonna structure it, and basic styling. You can override the styling, but most probably you might not have to. And this gives a lot of power. So accessibility and all such aspects are taken care of by default. And then you build your custom branding and custom styling on top of this. So it takes out a lot of maintenance effort, or because based on the library that you're choosing, you have a lot of interactions already built in. And you don't have to worry about that.
Namespace.
Or just some snippet I put directly, like not. But yeah, this is what the library recommends that we use. This is how they've composed it. So there's a big component, but individually you define these components. I could choose to not use input, or I could choose to use a button component which they provide and wrap it in the input, depending on the option that I want to use. When I click on the input, opens the drop down versus when you click on the input, just start typing, drop down automatically opens. So all such interactions can be customized by this approach. Or if you use some other library, may be that it's a little bit more opinionated in that sense, and probably not give you an option to do that. So.
Varieties where it's just a click, drop down, or it's autocomplete, which is what they type in, and it figures out what to populate the drop down.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, I mean that definitely a lot of libraries provide that. One of the problems that we had faced while implementing this is that the designers were really focused on, like we had to build a multiple select or a tag based component, and they didn't really want to follow what the material UI design looked like, or many other component libraries would like
the chips.
The chips coming in, yeah.
We're using that a lot. So.
Yeah, And all the variants of MUI and other libraries could not simply follow that, what we wanted to achieve. So we ended up using one of the headless ones where we could custom define our interaction. Yeah, one of the cases where it was helpful to be able to choose different package based on the need.
So that to me is an interesting thing right there. Is that a point where you go, okay, the designer wants to do something that's very different from what maybe ever do? Is that designer off base? Is there a reason they're doing that? Like, because everybody's used to the chip, for what were the reasons? I'm curious for.
Yeah, I think the guidelines or the approaches that designers were using at the time was it made sense for them to follow the similar approach. It was not necessarily something that was the most common out there. Again, that's the part of custom branding, right? You have your own interactions and your own styling, which you follow. So it may or may not be the right choice, but again, it is something that this type of arguments with this approach, at least, it always comes back where you are in constant negotiation with designers about you implement it certain way and you implement it certain way. Let's bring us about to some customizable libraries, which are out of the box, a lot of components. Just get what they have, and don't really put your brains on how you want a particular components to interact. So this could become really powerful. I found
All complete with UI built in.
they're not headless. Okay. So Radix is something which is bare bones. This is Chakra and Mandine, it does not come with a design set. This one is Mandine. It's getting really popular nowadays. It does not come out of the box with a lot of style. It comes out of the box with its default styling. It's a lot more customizable, totally opinionated, both these libraries. And possibly something where if you don't want to end up with a default styling of a particular library, you want to have some power, but also don't want to introduce a lot more development effort. Probably a good way to go about these custom libraries where you have a lot more power. Meta especially has an opt-in suite of libraries where you have hooks for your common interactions, which personally I like a lot. There is form validations and stuff like that, which is built right in. You can opt in, and then it just gets out of the box where you can just define your validation rules. So something like Formic just does it out of the box. So
that's kind of like a whole other discussion that we've been having. What do we do about forms? Because Formic and React's hook form, which I think is what we're using, overhead and complexity a lot of times. And what we end up often doing is just dispensing with the form altogether and just kind of keeping everything in state and keeping track. That in the form that you need for the API call, and boom, you're done. Now, obviously, there's drawbacks to that, but I don't know. It's a question we haven't quite solved yet. We're still trying to figure out because we're doing different things at different ways. Curious what other people are doing for form based.
What we do is form and what keyword and use on. One update or on change function.
Which I love the idea of using the built-in. But in terms of state, how do you tie it to, like, say you have a form with like 20 different inputs? How do you keep track of the state with each input? Well, yeah, I agree with you with that. We have very few where we have that many, but let's say 10. Like when you have a settings page, you need
Right.
that many, right? So how do you map the state to all the forms? You just like or ID?
Yeah, we use that.
I think that's pretty similar to what we're doing. I know it's like one of the.
Again, just electrical easier. Right, to just state of those fields and it will generate the data of those.
Again, a lot of these libraries again build out some of the things that you might not need, and some of the stuff that maybe creating an overhead. That
We have, it should be a whole second.
Yeah.
Because it is.
Okay, I'll just wrap it up with final stuff. Yeah, it's MUI. I think a lot of people are using it. I just wanna. I mean, yeah, of course, we all know the pros of using MUI, like or any other similar library. GitHub's recently introduced a primer design system of their own. It's really interesting. Right? AWS, yeah. So all of these companies, they have done a really good job at creating a lot of design system principles and a lot of UX problems or UI problems that you might have. Figured out some of the approaches should be taken care of. So gets your development time to minimum, and also well, again, we have discussed a lot of it about why it could be good at some places where you can really get to production really quick, but then again, branding and that is one of the cons. So
Is the vision to see Markov?
hopefully, yeah. yeah. That's what. So what we are trying to do is balance out right now with like the approach we are following. We're gonna take in some of the previous concepts from one of these libraries, probably the previous ones where they are not as much opinionated as UI and design something, and kind of build towards, make sure that we are not logged in to those systems, and then transition to where we have our own custom branding. So I had a bunch of questions, but I just want to open up to like what is your tech stack, and have you faced any challenges with your current system that you have followed? Any inputs or I know like you guys are trying to balance out designers ask versus what MUI that you use. Any constraints that you have felt that kind of feels like
I mean, the first one was just that they rejected MUI. Yeah, and then someone had a conversation, and then the next time MUI happened. But I think the other thing that helped us the most was that when I don't know why they thought that we wouldn't take their suggestion to implement them, but the first time we ever delivered something that they thought about our solution and they saw it, it just changed the whole dynamic. Like more messages started coming through, more interactions started coming through, collaboration happened. Developers, UX, and because it was like UX and product, that was the main thing. And the wall that I had kind of break through was asking product to say, hey, can we step into a meeting when you are having this interaction so that we have at least, because since I saw the first month, I was like, it's just gonna be great. Like I'm gonna tell you now to the product. It's not gonna happen. Like what you're asking us will not be built, and we're gonna do maybe down what you're asking. But if we work together, we can probably build what you're asking 89%, and then we can get stuff. So that was what happened, and it was fairly straightforward. He was a little bit hesitant about letting engineers in because he was scared that would delay deliverables. Like less an hour, that's 2 hours of your time, but then you can bring something else, or not. There's multiple engineers right there, and then
that ends up saying.
yes. So now we can say that that was.
And also, I don't know, maybe they have
Yeah, we're gonna move over now.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry to end you early.
Maybe they have